Hello everyone, it's me, Aaron, and welcome to another quick review. And today we're taking a look at Miles Morales Spider-Man. And I feel like this could be a very simple review because all you gotta do is say, hey, you remember how fun Spider-Man was a couple of years ago? This is more of that. But I do feel like I should probably actually go into a few more details about that because this, as many people know, it is not a full price game because they told us that this game was not going to be a full length game. It was meant to be a smaller game, and it is smaller than the previous Spider-Man game. But I gotta say, maybe it's just because I did everything in here. Maybe it's just because I took my sweet time swinging around the city, but this still feels like a full length game. This still feels like they could have sold this for $60 and it would have been just fine. I've seen a lot of people out there saying that this game took them about 8 hours to finish, which, first off, that's nothing to sneeze at. 8 hours is still a good chunk of time for a video game, but I can understand a lot of people out there saying, well, I don't know if 8 hours is worth $60. That's a whole other debate that I'm not going to get into, but I will say this. I wasn't timing myself when I played this game, so I don't know how long it took me to finish it. But I can guarantee you, it was way more than 8 hours. I put a solid chunk of time into this video game, and I haven't even platinumed this thing yet. In order to get the platinum trophy, you have to play through this game on New Game Plus, which I'll just go ahead and say this right now. This game does a very weird thing where it locks a lot of the upgrades behind New Game Plus. Like, you've got that upgrade tree that you had in the previous game where you can go in there and you can level up your skills and you can also level up each of your gadgets. However, the final level of each of these upgrades can only be achieved in New Game Plus, and that is a little bit weird to me. It is a little bit weird that they would not let you reach full power in your first playthrough. But at the same time, that does provide you with an incentive to go back in there and play through the game on New Game Plus for reasons other than just simply getting that platinum trophy. However, speaking about the time that it took me to finish this game, that is both a positive because it took me a good chunk of time, and as I said, this is not a full price game. There was definitely way more content in here than I was expecting to be in this game when everybody was talking about how this was going to be a much smaller game than the previous Spider-Man game. But there is one problem that I do have with the amount of time that I put into this game, which is how that time was divided up. Because in the previous Spider-Man game, you would play through the main story, then there would be all these side quests you would go and do. And there would be the main story, then the side quests. Main story, side quest. In this game, it almost feels like all the, not even full side quests, but all the collect-a-thon side quests, all the go and find this enemy base, go and find this item, all those types of side quests, it feels like they're almost the exact same amount as they were in the previous Spider-Man game. I know it's less. I know there isn't as many as there were in the previous Spider-Man game, but it's close. All the little go around the city and find these item things, there's almost as many in this game as there were in the previous Spider-Man game, but the story is definitely shorter, and that created my one big problem with this game, which was just when it came to actually dividing up my time, it wasn't like the previous Spider-Man game where it was story, quest, and this one was story. Now I'm just gonna go around the city and get all these things. And also all these things. And go and check on all these things. Now we can get back to story. Okay, now I gotta go around the city and get all these things. And then do all these trials. And then go and stop all these crimes that are popping up. And because there were so many more of those little like collect-a-thon or battle style side quests, they weren't as special to me as they were in the previous game. There came a point where they almost started to feel way more like work. Way more like things that I was just doing to fill in the map, as opposed to the previous Spider-Man game where I actually really wanted to do them simply because of how they were divided up. However, I do have to come in here and point this out. All that stuff is optional. You don't have to do any of that stuff. None of that stuff is really tied into the main story. There's only like a handful of the side quests that you actually do have to do. But aside from that, yeah, you can pretty much just stick to the main story itself. And speaking of that main story, Wow, does Insomniac know how to make a really good Spider-Man story? I had someone on Twitter ask me if we were going to do a spoiler talk for this game, and I thought to myself, yeah, probably not. I mean, it's just like a mini game. It's not going to be a feature-length game. There's not going to be nearly as much stuff for me to talk about. I am seriously tempted to do a spoiler talk on this game because it was that darn good. And what really impresses me about that is that when the game started off, I didn't really have a lot of faith that was going to be that good. Simply because, as I said, I knew this was going to be a smaller story, so I didn't think they were going to have the time that they would need in order to set everything up, in order to deliver that kind of an emotional impact that the previous game did. But the other reason why I was kind of hesitant about this story is because when this story begins, there is this whole mystery about, okay, who is this new villain? There's this new villain called the Tinkerer, and they're popping up, and Miles has to go and deal with them, and you gotta figure out who they are. And the second that the character who is the Tinkerer shows up in this story, I looked at them and went, oh, they're the Tinkerer. Like 1,000%. There is no way you are not going to instantly guess who the Tinkerer is. There is no suspense behind that. So I'll admit, when this story began, I looked at how that was delivered and I thought to myself, oh, this isn't going to be as good as the last story. But as the game went along, that story ended up building and building, and by the time it got to the end, I would say it is almost, if not completely equal with the emotional impact of the previous game. And a lot of the success of this story comes down to two elements. One is the neighborhood. The entire idea behind the Miles Morales Spider-Man game is that it is meant to focus way more on the fact that Spider-Man is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So this one deals a lot more with Miles' interactions with his community, and I love that. It actually makes this world feel even more alive and is able to build up to this big conclusion that has all that weight that you want behind a story like this. And the other reason why this story was able to succeed so well is simply because these characters are really darn good. Miles is a great character. His interactions with his best friend Genki, oh my goodness, those are so darn charming. I absolutely love seeing the way that these two characters work together in order to fight these crimes. It is great. And then you get introduced to so many other characters around Miles, like you get introduced to his Uncle Aaron, which if you know anything about Miles Morales, you know who his Uncle Aaron is. And I actually really enjoyed their interactions. I will say, just like with the Tinkerer, there is no suspense in the reveal of who his Uncle Aaron is. However, if you saw Into the Spider-Verse, you know who his Uncle Aaron is, so I can kind of understand this game coming in here and going, yeah, we're not going to try and build up to this thing because you already know what it is. I can understand that. Now, as for the actual gameplay itself, yeah, it is basically just Spider-Man again. However, I don't know if it is just because the PS5 can handle a lot more than the PS4 could. I don't know if it's because they've had a couple of years to take this amazing thing that they built a couple of years ago and then continue to improve it further, but this game feels even smoother than the previous game did. And it's not like the previous game was clunky. It's not like the previous game was something that you were just sitting there the whole time going, oh man, if it weren't for this horrible gameplay, this would be an amazing game. No, the gameplay in the previous game was phenomenal. It was one of the biggest selling points of that game. It was a game that made you, quote, feel like Spider-Man. I don't know who I'm quoting on that, but you know 1,000 reviews describe that game as feeling like that. Yeah, the web swinging in the previous game, the combat in the previous game, it was so incredibly good. And in this game, I didn't think they could make it better, but as I am zipping through the city, it feels like I am flying at speeds that I could never hope to reach in the previous game. It just feels that much smoother. And I kept hearing people say, oh, and they went back and they made the city look even better. I didn't know how they were going to do that because I heard people complaining about how the city looked in the previous game. I don't know what everyone was talking about. I thought New York looked amazing in the previous game. I thought it looked gorgeous. But as I was playing this, listen, it's not like it is a huge improvement. It still looks really good. It looked really good in the last one, still looks really good now. But there would be those moments in which I would look at it and go, oh my goodness, it is actually a little bit crisper. Like if I look way off in the distance, it doesn't get quite as blurry, and it's still very textured far off in the distance. Oh, that's actually really impressive. And Miles does have a ton of his own unique abilities that Peter Parker didn't have. You know, he's got the Venom Shock, which gives him the power to electrify some of his enemies. He's also got his invisibility power, which is great for stealth missions in here. Stealth in this game, it feels like the enemies are alerted much more easily than they were alerted in the previous game, but you can now turn invisible to just instantly escape any situation that goes bad. So it's a really good balance. I enjoy that. And the Venom Shock powers that you have, there's a wide variety of things you can do with that, and it makes the combat, which was already crazy and over the top in the last game, it makes it even better in this game. However, speaking of his electricity powers, speaking of his Venom Shock powers, this is another small complaint that I do have with this game, which is simply that, yeah, there's a lot of puzzles that you gotta solve in order to go through a level. There's a lot of things that you gotta do in order to open up doors as you go along. Almost every single puzzle is find a generator, have Miles electrocute that generator. They do try and spice it up every now and again, and instead of electrocuting a generator, you now have to find a generator and drain the electricity from it, which is literally the exact same concept. It's the exact same thing that you're doing. The most variety that you get is every now and again, after you turn a generator on, you then have to use your webbing to connect it to another thing to power that thing on, which every now and again was a nice little brain teaser, but that's about all that you got. So almost every single one of the little puzzles you had to solve in this game, it's the exact same thing over and over again, and it did get kind of boring. So that is another small negative I gotta give this, but in the end, I'm still going to give this like an 8.5. I believe I gave the last Spider-Man game a 9 out of 10. The only reason I'm going a little bit smaller on this one is simply because, as I said, I don't think the balance between all the collectathons and the story is as good as it was in the last game, and also all the puzzles in this game. Listen, the puzzles in the last game might have been repetitive, but they weren't so repetitive that I noticed it. In this one, they are definitely repetitive enough that you're going to notice it. However, when it comes to the story, when it comes to the characters, this thing's a 10 out of 10. If I'm just judging it on that level, yeah, it is phenomenal. It's amazing. It's spectacular. It is ultimate. It is the best score that I could give this thing, but I can't just judge this thing on the story and the characters. But I will just wrap up here at the end by saying I went into this game expecting to like it because I like Miles Morales and I love that last Insomniac Spider-Man game, but I wasn't expecting to really be that moved by this game simply because, as I said, it was going to be a smaller game, so I did not think it would have the time in order to build up to those emotional highs as the previous Spider-Man game did. And I am walking out of this game with one of my favorite characters of the year, with one of my favorite boss fights of the year, with some of my favorite moments of any video game I played this year. It's incredible how this game just turned to me and said, you know, you don't need a 20 to 30 to 40 to 50 to 100 hour long video game experience in order to reach those emotional highs, right? So yeah, I absolutely applaud this game. I loved it, and oh my goodness, there's so many like little extras in here. I just realized I didn't even mention all the costumes that you can unlock in this game. Oh man, it's great to have a video game featuring superheroes where they have really cool unlockable costumes that aren't microtransactions. I'm not pointing a finger in any one direction on that one. I'm just saying. But yeah, let me know what you thought of Miles Morales Spider-Man in the comments down below. And also, let me know if you want us to do a spoiler talk on this one, because it is a really good story, and I would like to talk about, but I think if we did a spoiler talk, it would almost just be me sitting here going, man, wasn't that cool? What about this moment? That was really cool. Wasn't that great, everybody? So if you just want to hear me do that, let me know that in the comments down below, or let me know on Twitter at Thorgy's Arcade or on Twitch at Professor Thorgy. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Come back next time. Bye.